Imagine for a moment that the most powerful political force in the world isn't a president, a prime minister, or a billionaire donor. Imagine that this force doesn't hold rallies, doesn't buy television ads, and doesn't even have a name. Yet, in almost every major election across the globe, this group decides the future of nations. I'm talking about the people who stay home. In many modern democracies, the number of people who choose not to vote is often larger than the number of people who voted for the winner. If did not vote were a candidate, they would win in a landslide almost every single time. But why? Is it just laziness? Is it a lack of education? Or is there something much deeper, much more psychological happening inside the minds of millions of people?
Whenever an election rolls around, the narrative is usually the same. We see the passionate supporters, the heated debates, and the constant reminders to get out and vote. And when the results come in, the finger-pointing begins. We blame the people who didn't show up. We call them apathetic, or we say they don't care about their future. But if we actually sit down and look at the psychology of the non-voter, we find a story that is far more complex and, frankly, far more human than just not caring. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of the human brain to understand the hidden forces that drive someone to walk away from the ballot box. We're going to look at the why behind the silence.
To understand this, we first have to look at something called the rational choice theory. Now, don't let the academic name fool you. It's actually a very simple concept that we use every single day. Every time you decide whether to buy a cup of coffee or walk an extra 10 minutes to save $1, you're using rational choice. Your brain is constantly performing a cost-benefit analysis. You ask yourself, is the effort I'm putting in worth the reward I'm getting out? When it comes to voting, many people's brains give them a very clear no.
Think about it. For a single individual, the statistical probability of their one vote being the literal tiebreaker in a national election is almost zero. It's like a drop of water in the ocean. When someone looks at the cost, taking time off work, standing in a long line, researching complex policies, and dealing with the stress of political conflict, and compares it to the benefit of 1/1,000,000th of an influence, the math just doesn't add up for them. In economics, this is called rational ignorance. It's not that these people are unintelligent, it's that they have logically concluded that the energy required to be an informed voter is greater than the impact their single vote will have.
But it goes much deeper than just math. There is a powerful psychological state known as learned helplessness. This concept was first discovered in psychology experiments, where subjects were put in situations where no matter what they did, they couldn't change a negative outcome. Eventually, they just stopped trying. They became passive. We see this in the political world all the time. Imagine living in a district where one party has won by a massive margin for the last 40 years. Or imagine living through cycle after cycle of politicians making big promises, only for your daily life to stay exactly the same or get worse. Over time, your brain builds a wall. You start to believe that the system is a closed loop, and you are on the outside. This isn't apathy, it's a defense mechanism. If you don't participate, you don't have to feel the sting of disappointment when things don't change. For many non-voters, staying away from the polls is a way to protect their mental well-being from a system that feels indifferent to their existence. It's a way of saying, you can't fail me if I don't give you the chance.
Now, let's talk about the paradox of choice. You've probably felt this at a grocery store or while scrolling through a streaming service. When you have too many options, or when the options all feel slightly off, your brain freezes, you get overwhelmed, and you end up choosing nothing. In politics, this manifests in a few ways. Sometimes a voter feels that both candidates are fundamentally the same. Other times they feel that neither candidate represents their core values. When a person feels that there is no good choice, the act of voting starts to feel like a betrayal of their own integrity. They feel that by voting for the lesser of two evils, they are still endorsing an evil. To them, refusing to vote isn't a sign of laziness, it's a moral stand. It's a way of saying, I refuse to put my name on a system I don't believe in. They view their silence as a protest. But here's the kicker. The system often can't tell the difference between a moral protest and someone who just forgot it was Tuesday.
There's also a fascinating social element to this called the spiral of silence. Humans are social creatures. We have an evolutionary need to belong to a group.
If you live in a community or a family where political discussion is discouraged or where your specific views are in the minority, you might experience a psychological pressure to stay silent. You start to feel that expressing your opinion, even through a private ballot, is a risk to your social standing. Eventually, that silence becomes a habit. You stop seeing yourself as a political being altogether. You become the person who doesn't do politics because it's the safest identity to hold. Now, think about this. Have you ever noticed how much anger is involved in modern politics? The constant shouting, the us versus them mentality, the fear-mongering. For a lot of people, this creates an intense aversion response. Just like you might avoid a room where people are screaming at each other, millions of people avoid the entire political process because it feels toxic. Their brain associates voting with conflict, and our brains are wired to avoid unnecessary conflict. This is especially true for people who value harmony and stability. To them, the ballot box isn't a tool for change, it's a source of stress that they'd rather keep out of their lives.
But let's look at the other side of the coin. There is a psychological concept called institutional betrayal. This happens when an institution that is supposed to protect you or represent you, like a government, actually causes you harm. For many marginalized communities, the history of voting isn't one of empowerment, it's one of exclusion. When a group of people has been historically told, either through laws or through social practice, that their voice doesn't matter, that message sticks. It gets passed down through generations. This creates a deep-seated psychological alienation. It's not that they don't understand the importance of voting, it's that they don't believe the system was ever built for them in the first place. For these individuals, the act of not voting is a reflection of a broken relationship between the citizen and the state.
So, where does this leave us? When we look at the millions of people who don't show up, we aren't looking at a monolith of lazy people. We are looking at a massive group of individuals who are responding to very real psychological pressures. We're looking at people who are doing the math and feeling like they lose either way. We're looking at people who are exhausted by the noise. We're looking at people who feel invisible. The real question isn't, why don't they vote? The real question is, what would it take for them to feel like they belong? Because the psychology of non-voting tells us that people participate when they feel a sense of agency, when they believe that their actions have a direct, visible connection to their reality. When that connection is severed, the brain naturally retreats.
As we wrap this up, think about the people in your own life who don't vote. Instead of judging them, try to see which of these psychological doors they might be standing behind. Is it the door of learned helplessness, the door of rational choice, or perhaps the door of institutional betrayal? Understanding the why is the first step towards changing the how. Democracy is often described as a conversation, but a conversation only works if everyone feels invited to the table. Right now, millions of people feel like they're standing in the hallway, watching through a window, wondering if their voice would even be heard over the noise. The future isn't just built by those who show up. It's shaped by the reasons why the others stayed away. Maybe, just maybe, if we spent less time blaming the non-voter and more time understanding the psychology behind their silence, we might find a way to make the did not vote party the smallest one in the room.
Until then, the silent majority remains the most powerful mystery in the world of politics. And the next time you see an empty voting booth, remember, it's not just an empty space. It's a story of a human brain making a choice, even if that choice is to stay silent. What's your story going to be?